It was my birthday dinner, but Mom was running the show. She leaned over the table, smiling like she was issuing a royal decree. "Since we're all together," she quietly told Dad, "tell your son to go switch out the locks at her place." The sound of forks hitting plates stopped abruptly. My brother, Owen, didn't ask why. He just got up and left, acting like it was totally normal to invade his sister's privacy on her actual birthday. For about an hour, the conversation went from laughter to worried whispers. When Owen finally returned, he was shaking and totally white, like the tablecloth. "Mom, something's wrong," he told her. Her perfect smile immediately disappeared. My gut instinct told me that whatever he found at my place was a secret that needed to stay buried. People imagine families are warm places, full of genuine laughter, real hugs, and birthday celebrations. My family always seemed to fit that description perfectly. We had flawless smiles and holiday pictures, matching outfits, and smooth conversations about career moves and trips. But that perfect image was just a show. My mother, Mrs. Dalton, was the one directing it. Dad was her quiet financial backer, and my brother Owen was always the celebrated star. Since childhood, I understood my job: keep silent, make sure the family brand wasn't damaged. If Owen forgot to check in, Mom claimed he was busy. If I skipped one family dinner, she'd label me selfish. Somehow, every issue always landed on me. I used to believe that if I accomplished more, maybe I could finally earn the same approval she gave him. But control doesn't end when you succeed. It just adapts. That whisper at the dinner wasn't accidental. It was calculated. I noticed the seating arrangement immediately, Owen next to Dad and me positioned directly across like I was only there to observe. Even the birthday cake was his preferred flavor, not mine. When she used the phrase, "while everyone's here," she wasn't talking about convenience. She needed observers. She needed that sense of power. Dad didn't challenge her either. He never does. After decades of avoiding conflict, he just echoes whatever she says. He simply mumbled, "Just wait until after the dessert." It sounded like he was checking off an errand. Owen quickly agreed, focused on following instructions. I remember running my finger around the edge of my water glass, trying to look detached. But internally, I felt sick, changing the locks at my apartment. What was the reason? What had I supposedly done now? I had been living in my own space for 3 years, a modest apartment in Denver that I shared with my son, Jude. It wasn't luxurious, but it was completely mine, my haven. I thought I was the only person who held a key. Clearly, I was wrong. When Owen walked away from the table, I froze. Mom immediately went back to talking to our relatives, her voice sounding sweet, as if she hadn't just ordered someone to trespass. My dad weakly smiled, swirling his glass of wine, choosing to ignore how quiet I was. I left for the restroom, just needing a moment to breathe. The mirror showed a calm woman, neat hair, lipstick perfect. Nobody could see the absolute chaos that was happening inside my head. When I got back, an hour had gone by. Owen was standing there, shaking and pale. He leaned into Mom, his voice breaking. "You have to see this," he said. Her face immediately became rigid. "What are you talking about?" Owen paused, glancing nervously in my direction. "There's police tape wrapped around her apartment door." The entire table went completely silent. Mom's fork fell out of her hand. I didn't move or blink, realizing that the real confrontation, the one she hadn't planned, was just beginning. The ride back to Denver felt completely endless. The steady, cold flash of the streetlights across the windshield made me feel anxious and exposed. My phone wouldn't stop vibrating. It was Mom, Dad, and even Owen, but I refused to answer any of them. The city outside seemed normal, yet I could sense an irreversible change taking place. When I finally got to the complex, I saw 2 police cars right by the entrance. The flashing blue and red lights hit the brick walls, and my stomach immediately clenched. I barely registered getting out of the car, only the sound of my heels on the pavement before a uniformed man approached. "Ms. Dalton," he asked. "I'm Sergeant Hayes. Are you the resident of Unit 401? I asked what was happening. He consulted his notes, explaining that a break-in had been reported. "Your door was clearly forced, but oddly nothing appears to be missing," he said. I blinked, struggling to process the idea of a break-in. Who would do this? Sergeant Hayes paused before asking if I knew anyone who possessed a spare key. My throat tightened instantly. "Yes, my brother Owen Dalton." The officer looked up, surprised, his pen hovering. And why exactly did your brother have access? I hesitated, then admitted. Because my mother instructed him to. Instructed him to do what? He pressed. Replace my locks, I said quietly. He let out a slow breath, writing something down. That's quite an unusual instruction. I immediately clarified. I did not give permission. He nodded. We'll check the building surveillance. You should find somewhere else to stay tonight. But I stayed put. I looked through the cracked doorway into my living room. While nothing was destroyed, the feeling of safety I had built was instantly gone. Then I noticed it. All the pictures of me and Jude hanging on the wall had been carefully flipped face down, one by one. Sergeant, I whispered, pointing to the photos. He stepped closer, scanning the area with a light. On the coffee table was a plain white envelope. He handed me gloves. You should open this. Inside, the printed message was brief. Tell your mother the truth always finds its way home. My hands started shaking. Sergeant Hayes looked puzzled. Does this mean anything to you? I managed to shake my head, but my heart understood perfectly. This message wasn't addressed to me. It was a clear, chilling warning meant for Mom. The careful system of control she had engineered was finally showing its first major cracks. She just wasn't aware of it yet. I barely slept that entire night. Every time my eyes closed, I kept seeing the envelope, the printed words challenging me like a direct dare. By morning, the heavy rain still hadn't let up. It hammered against the glass in loud, uneven bursts, making the silence in the apartment even more noticeable. When the phone finally rang, I assumed it was Mom. It wasn't. Ms. Dalton, this is Sergeant Hayes. His voice was calm and totally professional. We tracked a payment made to a guy named Michael Kent, the building's maintenance worker. It originated from a bank account registered under your mother's name. For a moment, I couldn't inhale. You are completely sure about that? The note, the payment, and the timeline all match up, he confirmed. We believe your mother might have paid him to get something from your apartment. Retrieve what? I asked, though I had a growing suspicion. Sergeant Hayes hesitated. That's exactly what we are trying to figure out. I suggest you speak to her directly, but you need to be careful. After the call, I sat on the edge of the bed, my pulse racing, the phone still clutched in my hand. Mom had hired someone. My mother, the one who was constantly focused on reputation and trust, had actually committed a crime just to invade my life. I immediately thought of the box in my closet, the one labeled Dad's business files. I had found it a month prior while organizing. Inside were property deeds, wire transfer records, and financial statements, all bearing my signature. I had initially dismissed it as a simple mix-up. Now I saw the truth. They weren't mistakes. They were just cover-ups. By late afternoon, I had decided what needed to happen. I quickly texted her, dinner, my place. 7:00 p.m. No more games. Her reply came instantly. Fine, be ready to face the truth. At 7, the knock came light but deliberate, exactly like her. Mom walked in, filling the small space with her scent and her relentless confidence. You should never have brought the police into this, she stated. I crossed my arms firmly. And you shouldn't have hired a man to break into my home. Her mouth tightened. You really don't understand the situation here. Then explain it, I demanded. She looked around the room, her eyes pausing on the flipped photos. Those papers you found, your father's business dealings are complex. Michael was instructed to retrieve them quietly before you did anything reckless. I gave a small, humorless laugh. You mean before I discovered you were using my identity to conceal your fraud? Her face instantly hardened. Watch your tone, Stella. But this time, I refused to lower my voice. No, Mom, you watch yours. Thunder rolled outside, as if the storm had been waiting for her arrival. Rain streamed down the window, catching the streetlights in distorted, crooked lines. Mom stood motionless in the center of my living room, perfectly dressed and composed, polished heels, pearls glowing against her black coat. She was the picture of someone hiding guilt. I was only protecting you, she said, her voice dropping to a near-gentle tone. I challenged her directly. By breaking into my house. You simply don't understand, she insisted, beginning to pace. Your father's company involves sensitive partnerships that absolutely cannot be made public. If those documents ever surfaced, it would financially destroy us. Us, I asked, or just you? Her eyes narrowed. Don't twist my words. Everything your father and I have done was calculated to secure this family's future. I almost laughed out loud. You used my name, Mom. You forged my signature on transfer forms and property deeds. You didn't secure the future. You actively stole it. Her voice finally cracked under the pressure of the storm. You think you're some kind of victim? Everything we possess, you benefited from. Your college, your first car, this apartment. Do you think those things just appeared? I paid for this apartment by myself, I stated, each word sharp. You just couldn't tolerate that something belonged to me without your fingerprints all over it. For the first time, I saw something shift in her expression. It wasn't regret, it was pure fear, fear of losing total control. She turned toward the window to hide her face. Stella, listen to me closely. If those documents become public, your father faces serious jail time. I folded my arms tightly. Maybe he deserves to. She spun back to face me. You wouldn't dare. I already did, I said, my voice barely a whisper. Sergeant Hayes has them. The color completely drained from her face. What? You wanted the truth out of my home, I explained. I handed it directly to the police. Lightning illuminated the room, slicing her silhouette in two. For a brief moment, she didn't look like my mother. She was simply a woman trapped by her own deceit. You are actively destroying your family, she whispered. I stepped nearer. No, Mom, you destroyed that the moment you chose to use me as your sheep. She shook her head, taking a step back as if I had physically hit her. You don't understand the ramifications of what you've done. I understand perfectly, I replied. I am establishing boundaries, something you never taught me how to do. The air grew heavy between us. Every quiet moment, every word, every unresolved issue we had both ignored was now intensely present and breathing. Her eyes shone with rage, not tears. You think you're powerful because you think the law is on your side, she spat out. You are completely naive. The world doesn't care about your little moment of revenge. I met her gaze steadily. It's not revenge, Mom. It is accountability. She laughed, a cold, fragile sound. You will live to regret this. Maybe, I said, but at least it will be my regret. The room became silent again, save for the constant rain. A car horn echoed somewhere outside, distant and hollow. She stood still, her chest rapidly rising and falling, looking like she might either scream or collapse. Finally, she delivered her ultimate threat. If you go through with this, you will never have a family again. I stared back at her. Then maybe it's time I build one that is actually worth having. She froze, her face hardening as the mask of composure slipped back into place. Without another word, she turned and started walking toward the door. The loud click of her heels on the hardwood floor sounded exactly like a legacy shattering. Just before she reached the doorknob, I spoke up. One last thing. She stopped but didn't turn around. You asked why someone flipped those pictures in my apartment, I said. Maybe it's because even strangers can clearly see which side is the right side up. Her hand visibly shook once before she yanked the door open and vanished into the storm. The immediate burst of thunder seemed to follow her out. I stood there for a long time, watching the door gently sway from the draft. My hand was shaking, not out of fear, but from release. I walked over to the table where the envelope still rested. I picked it up, ripped it in half, and dropped it into the trash. This time, silence felt like victory, not surrender. It felt like true ownership. The next morning, I met Sergeant Hayes at the station. My hair was damp, and the air outside was thick with residual rain. He gave me a brief nod. You are completely sure you want to proceed. I am finished covering for them, I stated simply. He slid a file folder toward me. Inside were copies of the documents, bank statements, and confirmation that my parents' assets were being frozen pending a full investigation. Once this moves to the Financial Crimes Division, he explained, they will launch a complete case. You will be cleared of all liability. I let out a slow, deep breath. Good. He paused. You know this is going to make local headlines. I know, I said, but at least they will be based on the truth. By the time I left the precinct, the clouds were beginning to scatter. Sunlight broke through in hesitant, thin rays. When I reached the daycare to pick up Jude, he was waiting with a gold star sticker on his shirt. He ran directly into my arms. "Mom, look, I got a star for being brave." I smiled down at him. "I got a star too, sweetheart. You just can't see mine yet." He giggled, not understanding, and for the first time in years, I didn't need him to. We drove home in silence, his small hand resting on my arm. The world outside smelled fresh, like it had been washed clean. Back at the apartment, I made the pancakes he loved, lots of syrup and very little patience. He talked about his friends and his school day, and for the first time, I didn't feel like I was running from anything. There were reporters' messages I hadn't answered, and calls I wouldn't return. Let them talk. The truth no longer required my permission. That evening, after Jude was asleep, I stood by the window again. The city lights blinked in the distance. I thought about my parents, not with my old anger, but with crystal clarity. They had unintentionally taught me the vast difference between control and genuine love, between loyalty and forced silence. And somewhere between their lies and my new truth, I had finally found myself. The following morning, I walked into the post office carrying one final envelope. Inside were the last documents detailing my parents' offshore accounts. No message, just the unadulterated truth. As I sealed it, I whispered, "This ends right now." Outside, the air was bright, honest, and cool. I walked toward my car, feeling a sense of peace I hadn't known since I was a child. News travels fast when scandal involves serious money. Within a week, every local news outlet had picked up the story. Prominent couple under federal review for identity fraud. My phone was constantly lighting up with calls from reporters, relatives pretending to care, and lawyers. I never answered. Let the world speculate. I was done explaining myself. My apartment was quiet now. The flipped photos were rehung, every frame straight. Jude's laughter easily filled the space where my fear used to live. Sometimes, late at night, I still mentally prepared for her call. But it never came. Not because of guilt, but because of shame. Dad resigned from his firm the day the investigation went public, citing health reasons in a one-line company statement. Mom completely disappeared from her social circles. For a woman who lived exclusively for appearances, silence was the most appropriate punishment. Sergeant Hayes called a few days later. "You've been completely cleared, Ms. Dalton. The case is moving forward." "Thank you," I said, "for believing my side." He paused. "You didn't need me to believe you. You just needed to believe yourself." After hanging up, I looked around my living room, the same space that had been violated and then reclaimed. The air felt lighter, like the apartment itself was breathing freely again. I poured coffee and opened the window. The city sounded alive. Horns, footsteps, the soft, general hum of a place that doesn't care who you used to be. That weekend, I hosted a few friends for dinner, the people who had stayed loyal through the fallout. We didn't discuss my parents. We didn't need to. Nana raised her glass. "To freedom," she said, "and to never apologizing for protecting yourself." I smiled genuinely. "I'll definitely drink to that." Later, after everyone had left, I tucked Jude into bed. Half asleep, he mumbled, "Are we safe now, Mom?" I gently brushed his hair back. "Yes, baby, we absolutely are." He sighed and drifted off. For the first time in years, I spoke those words without any doubt. The next morning, bright, soft sunlight flooded the kitchen. Jude was kicking his legs at the table, syrup already on his cheek. I flipped pancakes, watching the light move across the floor, tracing new boundaries that finally belonged only to me. I had spent years desperately trying to maintain peace. It turned out peace isn't something you keep, it's something you claim. As I poured my coffee, I looked at my son and whispered, "This time the locks stay mine."